They said that they were going to bring America to its knees. Canada stood on stage in Mexico and declared an all-out boycott on the United States. They told the world to stop buying from us, to stop visiting us, to punish us for electing President Donald J. Trump. But now, just weeks later, guess who's scrambling to keep the lights on? So while Trudeau's allies were turning U.S. products upside down in grocery stores and chanting about fascism, President Trump was watching the bond markets, tracking the global yield curve, and waiting to strike when it would hurt the most. Now, today, I want to break down how President Trump's tariff strategy didn't just survive the boycott, but it bankrupted it. In fact, Canadian store shelves are bare, empty shelves in Canada. Mexican exporters are bleeding. The same leaders who called him a dictator are now begging for economic relief. Now, in just a minute, I'm going to show you exactly why August 7th is the day the world realized that Trump wasn't bluffing, and why investors, economists, and even foreign governments are now calling this one of the smartest economic chess moves in modern history. So here's a question everyone watching the show right now needs to answer. Was this boycott a bold stand for democracy, or was it the biggest case of self-inflicted economic collapse that we've ever seen? Oh, and of course, before this video ends, I'm going to show you something that wasn't in the headlines. This is something that proves that Trump's tariffs didn't hurt Americans. They empowered them. Now, this is not just about trade. This is about pride. It's about sovereignty. And it's about what happens when a strategic American president decides that he's done playing nice with these global freeloaders. If you appreciate the news updates, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much, guys. So let's go ahead and break down exactly how this so-called international resistance began, okay? So it started in Mexico City, on stage at the Pan-American Conference in Congress. Charlie Angus, a former Canadian MP, he stepped up to the mic and he declared economic war on the United States. Yeah, not figuratively, but literally. Angus urged Mexico, Central America, South America, and Canada to boycott everything that was American. No U.S. goods, no U.S. tourism, no participation in the U.S.-led trade or economic policy. He told the crowd to make America hurt. His exact words, guys. And the whole room cheered. This was supposed to be a statement of global solidarity, a heroic resistance. But was it? Well, because while they were busy holding holding hands in Mexico City, something else was happening. American companies were rerouting exports. Trump was rebalancing trade. In Canada, well, they were about to learn the hard way what happens when you try to slap a superpower in the face during a trade war. So here's your first judgment moment, okay? Was this a noble stand? Or was it a temper tantrum with economic consequences? Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this one, guys. But first, wait until you hear what Angus said next. Because if you thought calling for a boycott was wild, it gets even more unhinged. So I want to talk about what he actually accused America of doing, okay? Now, look, debate is healthy. I'm all for debate. Passion, understandable. But Charlie Angus, he didn't stop at trade criticism. He crossed the line into absolute hysteria. He called the United States a gangster fascist regime. Can you believe that? He claimed Americans were kidnapping Canadians off the street. Dude, I've never even heard anything that wild ever in my life. He even accused President Trump of setting up concentration camps. These are real quotes, guys. This wasn't a protest. This was a ever-loving meltdown if I've ever heard one. So here's where it gets even more interesting. While Angus is ranting about fascism, President Trump, he's watching bond yields. While they're screaming on stage, turning red in the face, he was studying the economic indicators. Now, one side is performing for applause. The other side is timing tariffs, watching the 30-year treasury, and calculating maximum pressure. So ask yourself, who looked unhinged and who looked like a leader? Now, you're going to want to hear what happened next, because while they're out here yelling their freaking heads off about concentration camps, Canada's shelves were about to go empty, and not because of any American sanctions, but because the boycott backfired. So I'm going to get into that next. Now, did you hear about how Canadian grocery stores started running out of basic goods and why Mexico couldn't even save them? You're going to want to hear how Trump's patience turned into a perfect economic trap. Wow. So Even if you're not on Medicare yet, someone you love probably is. Maybe it's your parents, maybe it's your spouse, maybe if it's a friend at church. Do them a favor right now. Call Chapter on their behalf and share this phone number with them. You'll see a number at the bottom of your screen right now, 909-563-8279. This is the best way. This is going to be the best call that they'll have to make all year. Why? Well, Chapter saved Jamie from Texas over $600. Leslie Taylor, she's now saving $1,000 a year. I'm not making this stuff up, guys. I have partnered with Chapter because they care. They give real answers. They compare every Medicare plan available out there, and they don't push people into something that they don't need. So give our friends a call at Chapter right now. Phone number is at the bottom of the screen, or you can visit them on the website at askchapter.org/Ron. Or, again, you can call them today. You never know who you're going to help. And I guarantee if you saved a friend at church or a family member $1,000, they're going to really appreciate that. So while Charlie Angus was screaming in Mexico, Canadians back home, they're doing their part to fight the fascists by flipping over American products in the stores, refusing to buy U.S. goods, and canceling travel plans to Florida and to New York. Yeah. Now, at first, albeit, it looked like a unified front. Canadian media was glowing. Activists felt powerful. They were beating their chests. And then the shelves started going empty. The shelves started going bare. By mid-June, grocery stores across Ontario and Quebec, they reported widespread shortages in American fruits, shortages in packaged foods, shortages on electronics, and yes, shortages on pharmaceuticals. And what about their plan to replace U.S. imports with goods from Mexico or Peru? What about that? Well, apparently it didn't work. Logistics fell apart. Supply chains were slow. And you know what happens when demand stays high and supply collapses? Prices spike hard. By July, Canadian households were paying 15 to 30% more for essentials. Travel agencies reported a $2.1 billion drop in tourism savings. And U.S. retailers, they rerouted their exports to Asia and South America in record time. Okay, let's take a pause for a second. Who was really punished here? Americans who just shifted trade and made billions in new deals elsewhere, or Canadian families who now couldn't afford blueberries or batteries. And now the Canadians are pissed off at their own government. If you're from Canada, let me know where you're watching from today, guys. And let me know if you're pissed off with your government, because this isn't speculation. This is documented economic fallout. And on top of that, here's the irony. Mexico, who clapped along with Angus in that speech, they were next in line to feel the squeeze. But before I get to Mexico, I want to talk a little bit about the real twist in this whole story, because none of this would have even worked unless President Trump waited. And what critics called hesitation, this was actually Trump's trap. So let's break this down. So tariffs were originally set to launch on April 2nd, which was Liberation Day. Show of hands, how many people remember Liberation Day? Trump said, he was talking about the tariffs that day for the first time, enabling them. But just hours before they kicked in, President Trump called a pause. Why? Because he was waiting and watching the 30-year Treasury yield. The bond market flinched. Foreign investors got nervous. And rather than cause unnecessary pain to American investors, Trump backed off temporarily. Critics mocked him, called him weak, claimed he chickened out. But let's look at the timeline. So April 2nd, there was a pause. April 9th, minor rollout, another pause. July 9th, postponed. August 1st, system updates. And now it's August 6th. And it was August 6th. But anyway, full force of the tariff begins in less than 24 hours. So you see, Trump wasn't backing down. He was loading the chamber. He waited for the markets to stabilize. He waited for customs to upgrade enforcement systems. And he waited for Canada and Mexico to burn through their stockpiles, to weaken their hand, and to overextend their boycott. Then, and only then, did he strike. Now, this wasn't hesitation. This was a precision-timed trap. And the moment that this trap snapped shut, tomorrow, ask yourself, was Trump indecisive or was he deadly disciplined? Because, let's get very specific right now, because it's one thing to talk, it's one thing to talk tough at a podium in Mexico, right? But it's a completely different deal with the consequences of picking a trade war with the United States while Trump is in office. So let's start with Canada, shall we? According to Travel Analysis, Canada lost over $3.2 billion in tourism spending this summer alone, just from its own citizens refusing to cross the border. So this means fewer hotel bookings, fewer business trips, fewer retail sales in border towns. The thousands of jobs have been put at risk. Meanwhile, as Canadian consumers boycotted American imports, U.S. retaliatory tariffs quietly kicked in on lumber, dairy, auto parts, and raw minerals. Canadian exporters got hit with double pressure, guys. Fewer sales to the U.S., higher costs for incoming replacement parts and equipment. So, let's not forget about the Canadian energy sector, okay? Trump's administration redirected multiple contracts to U.S.-based firms, cutting off billions in cross-border deals. Canadian oil producers, already strapped from global price shifts, they're now in panic mode. Mexico, we got to talk about Mexico, guys. So Mexico, they may have smiled and nodded while Mr. Charlie Angus, I always see his name and just kind of like laugh because I don't think of Angus when I see his name. Anybody think of what I'm thinking when you hear or see Angus? Anyway, so Charlie Angus gave a speech, but behind the scenes, the economic fallout, it came fast. So first, cross-border food exports, they slowed down, not because of a ban though, but because U.S. Customs quietly upgraded enforcement protocols to prioritize U.S. producers and allies that are playing fair. So the second thing that was done, they handled the logistic bottlenecks, right? Those began to emerge. Mexican supply chains, they weren't ready to replace U.S. inventory in Canada, and Peru wasn't even close. Third, and this one's huge, guys, foreign direct investment shifted rapidly into the United States as Trump doubled down on Made in America incentives. You know what happened? Mexico blinked. Mexican Trade Ministry has already opened private communications with the Trump administration to discuss tariff stabilization pathways, which, by the way, is globalist speak for stop hurting us. Okay, so now we have to ask, was this really a united front against the United States, or just two countries trying to bluff the strongest economy in the world and getting steamrolled? Well, here's what they really don't want you to hear. The media will not tell you this, but Trump's tariffs didn't just work. They're funding America's infrastructure. They're boosting the economy and they're shrinking the deficit. So we're going to go ahead and break that open next, shall we? So while global media called Trump's tariff plan reckless, while liberal pundits and, others cried fascism, and while Charlie Angus was flipping out in Mexico City, here's what really happened, okay? In June 2025 alone, the United States collected $26.6 billion in tariff revenue. I'm going to say that one more time. In 1 month, $26.6 billion. Now, let's put that into perspective. The United States government spends like $580 billion a month. So no, tariffs don't pay for everything, but they're not nothing either. You see what I'm saying here, guys? That revenue is now going toward highway and infrastructure rebuilds. It's going toward defense manufacturing expansions, new tax cuts for middle-class families, programs supporting veterans and seniors. That's right, guys. Trump used foreign boycotts to generate cash for American citizens. So while Canada was flipping grocery products upside down in protest, Trump was out here flipping the entire boycott into billions in tax revenue. And it doesn't even stop there, because this tariff plan, it did more than hurt Canada and Mexico. It shook the global system. And the plan to move away from the United States, the plan to move away from the US dollar, that's where the backfire got even worse. So one of the loudest claims from Trump's critics, both foreign and domestic, was that these tariffs, they would accelerate de-dollarization. That's the theory that other nations would abandon the US dollar in global trade. Now, we've all heard stuff like this, right? Oh, we're not going to use the US dollar anymore in global trade. We're going to use gold or Bitcoin or the BRICS currency or something like that, right? And ultimately, that's America's financial power. And if they abandon using the US dollar in global trade, that we would collapse, right? But guess what? That didn't even happen. In fact, the opposite happened. Because while the boycotters were screaming, investors were watching. And when Trump delayed tariffs back in April to stabilize the bond market, that showed strength, not weakness. It told the world this president knows how to hit hard and hit smart. So what did global investors do? They flooded U.S. treasuries. They snapped up the U.S. industrials and commodity stocks. They moved capital out of China, Brazil, and Canada into the U.S. market. And so here's the kicker, guys. Okay. Many developing nations, especially Africa, Southeast Asia, started quietly reversing course. They backed off the anti-dollar agenda, they began pivoting back to American-led trade networks because they saw what happened to Canada and Mexico. You challenge Trump's economic order, you get cut off. So if you've been told that the dollar is dying or that Trump's tariffs triggered financial collapse, you've been lied to. And speaking of lies, let's talk about the markets, because for all the doomsday headlines about stocks crashing, the real story might shock you. So what we need to talk about is what really happens at S&P 500, NASDAQ, gold, and crypto, and how smart investors actually use Trump's tariff playbook to rake in the gains while the media panicked. So if you watch cable news recently in early July, they made it sound like Trump nuked the markets. Talking heads were everywhere screaming about the S&P talking about the S&P 500 falling, right? Well, yes, the market did dip about 5% when Trump confirmed that August 7th would be the final rollout of the reciprocal tariffs. But what they didn't show you was what happened next, because the bond yields didn't spike. The 30-year treasury remained stable, which means, right? It means Trump wasn't going to flinch this time, and the markets knew it. So what happened? The S&P stabilized by mid-July. By August 1st, capital started pouring back in. Gold and Bitcoin both rose, not out of fear, but as smart hedges during recalibration. Even better, though, foreign capital started flowing in as investors realized the U.S. is back in control and Trump's playing the long game. Some institutional investors, I'm talking Vanguard, Bridgewater, Fidelity, you may have heard of them, even began overweighing the U.S. manufacturing and infrastructure stocks. Now, translation, they're betting big on America again. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss the biggest wealth transfer in years. So if you sold on the dip, I don't give financial advice, but I wouldn't do that. I don't like selling on the dip. I look for deals during the dip, right? You bought into the fear if you did. But if you understood the strategy, you're probably sitting on some pretty hefty gains right now. So I applaud you for those of you who are seeing gains in your portfolios today. Let me know what you're seeing, guys. Now, we're not done yet, okay? Because back in Canada, that same speech that started this whole boycott thing, it's now coming back to haunt their leadership big time. So I'm going to show you guys how Trudeau's government is facing this full-blown backlash and how Trump's patience may have actually just taken down more of their trade numbers. So now that we've seen the boycott and how it failed globally, I want to zoom in on Canada because this is where things really start to kind of crack wide open. You guys remember back in May and June, Canadian media said 95% of citizens supported counter tariffs against the United States. Now, that was before grocery bills started going through the roof because fruit disappeared from shelves and before families realized that they would have to spend hundreds more every month just to feed themselves. And now support for the boycott is collapsing. Recent polling is now showing a very sharp reversal in July. So the moment consumers started feeling the pain, support for the anti-American tariffs plummeted. Even more devastating, energy workers. Those are the ones who were seen as political firewall for Trudeau and his allies. They have turned as well. These are the same people Charlie Angus claimed to represent working class, resource-based Canadians, but they watched the government kill $33 billion in clean energy job creation, shut down infrastructure, and then pick the fight with the United States, their biggest customer. Is the Canadian leadership a bunch of idiots? Is Justin Trudeau an idiot? Is Mark Carney a fool? And now they're asking, like, who exactly is this government helping? The boycott wasn't just an economic failure. It turned into a political revolt. So let me ask you directly, guys, when your own citizens start turning on you over bad economic decisions, is that really good leadership, or is it the cost of arrogance? Because while Trump's allies, or more importantly, because while Trudeau's allies were trying to make Trump look like the villain, it's their own people who are paying the price. And so now we arrive at the moment that kind of really ties all of this together, because everything that you've seen, the failed boycott, the tariff delays, the investor surge, it was all part of the strategic timeline, and it all leads to August 7th. So, all right, from August, let's bring it on home. From April to August, President Donald J. Trump, the 47th president of the United States, he was called everything under the sun: weak, hesitant, afraid of the bond market, controlled by Wall Street. But the truth is, he was watching, waiting, timing the markets. While global elites threw tantrums and flipped products upside down in grocery stores, Trump studied the bond yields. He modernized customs enforcement. He watched Canada and Mexico walk straight into an economic trap. And now, on August 7th, the tariffs land in full force. When their shelves are empty, when their currencies are shaky, when their leadership is panicking. This wasn't chaos. This was clearly discipline. This wasn't retaliation. This was defensive patriotism, using economic policy to protect American families, industries, and sovereignty. And while the media is not going to admit it, the numbers don't lie. Billions in new tariff revenue, surge in U.S. market confidence, collapse of the so-called boycott, and a strategic president who once again proved that America wins when it has the courage to wait, watch, and strike when the time is right. So now it's your turn, guys. Was this lucky timing? Was it just lucky timing? Or did President Trump play this a little bit like a grandmaster? Drop your answer in the comments down below, guys, and let me know, do you think any other leader could have pulled this off? And while you're at it, make sure you're subscribed, and don't forget to like this video. And like this video if you're glad to see America back in control on the global stage. And hey, if you want the full breakdown of how these tariffs will affect you directly, your retirement, your savings, your grocery bill, then make sure to watch this next video that just popped up on your screen right there. YouTube thinks you're going to love it, and frankly, I do too.